It has been a joy and our privilege to host you for this week. It's been helpful for our church and for our staff so many times. It's hard for us to see the forest for the trees, but you have reminded us of who we are and whose we are. Sometimes we end up comparing ourselves to ourselves, and you've helped us to see our ministry through fresh eyes, and that has inspired us and encouraged us, and we are so grateful that you're here. We are grateful for your compliments. I have to pass on my appreciation to our point person on staff, one of my associates, Julie Schindel, who has been a part of the planning team, and I'm grateful for her help. Thank you, Julie. We are blessed here at Peachtree Road. As you can see, we have wonderful facilities. We have incredible ministry of outreach and nurture and discipleship. We have a wonderful place in which we worship, and our services on Sunday morning are inspiring. We are delighted to be able to share those with you. But I want you to know that one of the major resources we have is wonderful lay leadership in this church. And one of those persons is my friend Bill Curry. Bill is a member here at Peachtree Road. He is a former football player for, among others, the Baltimore Colts and the Green Bay Packers. He has been a football coach in college at Georgia Tech, at Alabama, at Kentucky, and he helped start the program here in Atlanta for Georgia State. More importantly than being a football player and a football coach, he is a mentor and he is a disciple of Jesus Christ. And you will be blessed this afternoon. So would you join me in welcoming Bill Curry?
I'd rather just listen to the band for another hour. Wherever those kids around here, you're fantastic. You're wonderful, all of you. God bless you. I'm also here because of Bill Britt's generosity and kindness in allowing me to participate in this wonderful event. And I'm honored to be here. And I've been given the title to the remarks that I'm to make, and it is Tell the Truth. And the very moving words we just heard from the previous speaker, whose name I did not catch, touched me in my heart, because I stood at Nuremberg 2 years ago and I saw what you remember too well. And we experienced that which can happen when the horror of racism and hatred and illogical ideology is implanted in the fertile minds of those that have been alienated in so many, many ways. And I think that this is a signal moment for the Christian community to tell the truth. See the truth, tell the truth all the time. I had two goals in life. I was 12 years old and I had two goals. Pitch for the New York Yankees and marry Carolyn Newton, in that order. Because the Yankees had Yogi Berra, and I had not really appreciated Carolyn Newton completely yet. In the 6th grade, I announced that I was going to marry Carolyn Newton. Oh, by the way, only one thing kept me out of the major leagues in baseball: talent. But in the 6th grade, I announced I intend to marry Carolyn Newton. And my father, I lived in College Park, Georgia. She was the most beautiful girl in the world. She is still the most beautiful girl in the world, and the smartest kid in College Park, Georgia. And my father said, "That is the best idea you've ever had." "Is Carolyn aware of your plan?" I said, "Not yet. She's taller than me." She was 5'2" and I was not. I was a chubby, short little guy who was usually in the principal's office, and she would not speak to me for 6 years. But I am very, very persistent. Last December, we celebrated our 54th wedding anniversary. The other day we were just visiting about things like that. I said, what changed? I mean, you wouldn't even talk to me for 6 years. What happened? She said, you grew a foot. That helped a lot. I grew up a Presbyterian, College Park Presbyterian Church. I married a Methodist girl, and we did, guys, you understand very well about these marital compromises. We did a marital compromise. I joined the Methodist Church. I even ended up at Candler School of Theology. And I had one buddy out there that if he'd have been a football player, he'd have been an offensive lineman. He wasn't really, really bright. He didn't work very hard. He tried hard, but he was a little hefty. He didn't quite get himself in shape. He didn't quite work hard enough on his sermons and things, but he tried, and he was a decent guy. He loved God, and he loved his people. And I also learned about how the Methodist Church does things, how the church usually moves ministers about every 4 years. It's a lot like football coaches. But this old boy went out to his first charge, and his congregation got together at the end of 1 year, and they voted unanimously for him to move on early. So he did, but he was undaunted, and he continued to do his sort of average work. And it didn't bother him really until it had happened 8 times in a row. When he heard his 9th congregation was holding a meeting, he just started to pack. And when the guy came by to take him to the church that normally accompanied him, he said, look, I know why you're here. I know you've had a meeting, you've had some kind of vote, and I've already packed, I'm ready to go. And he said, oh, no, preacher, we want you to stay. He said, you don't mean it. He said, I do mean it. And we voted, and we voted unanimously. He said, wow, that's just wonderful. I know I shouldn't ask something like this, but what is it about me? I mean, was it my preaching or my interpretation of the scripture that made y'all want to keep me? He said, you want the truth? He said, yeah, I want the truth. He said, well, we voted, and it was unanimous, and what we decided was we don't want no preacher around here nohow, and you about the nearest thing to nothing that we could find. That's how I feel today. What am I doing here? Thanks a lot, Bill Britt, for getting a beat-up old football guy to speak to people that are this sophisticated and this wonderful. And I take this very seriously, and I am thrilled to be here, and I will do my best. That beautiful lady and I now have, through our 2 children and their wonderful marriages, we have 7 grandchildren. And there has been another kind of education. And I tell you these stories not just so that we can chuckle about grandchildren, but to make a point. Beautiful Evelyn, she's now 14. She's this tall. When she was about 4, I was spending a lot of time with her because I was working for ESPN as a broadcaster, and I had some time. So I relearned diapers, and we took walks, and we rocked and all as she was growing up. And she was this beautiful, brilliant, expressive. By the way, all our grandchildren are brilliant, all of them. But I would rock with her, and we'd spend time. And so one day, the grandchildren called me Bo for reasons we never have established. But I was rocking, and I said, oh, Evelyn, there's so much I wish I could tell you. I love you so much. She said, I love you so much too, Bowie. And I could tell you some things. I said, well, go ahead. You can tell me anything. She said, your breath is terrible. We got a 9-year-old. Our son lives in Charlottesville with 5 boys and his beautiful wife. So our heart was touched maybe a little more deeply than most as we agonized over what might happen. Both our children graduated from UVA. And our son intentionally took his family back there because he loves the community so. And his reporting, just as a moment of encouragement here while and I'll digress, his report, he's called us every day and said, Dad, you have never seen so much love pouring out of this community. Things have changed. You go downtown and people are being nice to each other that are never nice to each other. I'm talking about people from different racial, different ethnic, and different, as you can imagine on college campus, there are all kind of ideologies and religions present there. And something has happened that is positive because of the horror that we witnessed. And that's what the best prayer should be for us, I think. But we'll get back to that in a moment. Now we're talking about Brett, who's 9 years old. When he was 5, he's got 2 teenage brothers, and he's only 5 years old. And I walk in his house. At this time, they lived in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they all see me as a large toy anyhow. So I walk in, and he says, "Hey, Bo, get your ass upstairs. Let's play video games." I said, "What did you say?" "Sit down. Don't you ever speak like that. That's profanity. You be polite the way your mama's taught you and your father." I'm going to talk to the 2 big brothers soon, too. "Don't you ever speak to anybody like that. Do you understand me?" He said, "Oh, yes, sir, okay." I said, "Let's try it again." He said, "Get your ass upstairs, please." Now, here's the serious part. I've been working with teenage males for the last 60 years, since I was one of them. Teenage males. I've been responsible for 105 teenage males in downtown Atlanta 24/7. Want to have some fun? We can tell some stories about how much fun that was. But it was. Because we have to learn to speak their language. I had to learn, not just to, and to this day, every day since Evelyn said that 10 years ago, I carry these things around. And every day when I'm speaking to a group of people, I try my best to understand how their minds work and what their interpretation is going to be of what I say because of where I come from and what I represent. For the longest time, I thought I was cool. I thought I was so busy and so important. And I had a couple of friends who set me straight regularly. And then life began to set me straight. And then God set me straight, which he has done so many, many times. And what I realized is that I'm not so cool, but you are. I realized that every human being is blessed with a gift. I worked 2 years at Baylor School in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and as you leave the premises there at that fabulous location, there's a Latin word, 12 letters, 5 syllables, 1 word, magnanimitas. Say it with me, magnanimitas. It means greatness of spirit. You have greatness of spirit. God has blessed you with a unique gift that nobody else has. Cooperate with me now. I'm a youth worker, and I'm the oldest person in this room for sure, so please cooperate with me. And take a look at your hand. Now, for you former linemen, you could look at the left or the right. You don't have to make a decision. And just study the little striations and the marks and maybe the psoriasis there. And understand, this is something you already know, but I'm reminding you that if we had the capacity to do fingerprints of the roughly 7 billion people on earth today, there would not be another set of fingerprints like the one you're looking at, because you're unique and you're beautiful and you're precious and you have a gift. You have magnanimitas. You have greatness of spirit in a way that nobody else ever has had, nobody has today, nor will there ever be anybody else like you. And today, all of us, and I think especially the Christian community, if we are to be what we say we are, if we really are serious about love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, if that is real, then we must find the truth and tell it and say it again and again and again with determination and with courage, regardless of the consequences. Being aware of other people's feelings, of course, being aware that we're going to be misinterpreted, being aware that somebody's going to call us a religious fanatic, and being aware that it may not get the results that we wish, but at least we'll be able to look God in the eye and understand that we have sought to utilize the magnanimitas that he's given us to the best of our ability. Now, Paul gives us a stern message. Don't you know that in a race there are many runners, but only one wins the prize? So run to win. Others run for the temporal prizes, but we run for the eternal. When I train my body, I am not shadowboxing or messing around. I fight to win. With purpose in every step, I fight to win, lest I, who enlisted others for the race, be declared unfit and asked to stand aside. That's where we are. We don't have any choice. We're in the race. If you take on the mantle of Christ in your heart, you got work to do right now, and so do I. I'm almost 75 years old, and I seriously expected to be out to pasture by this time, but I hadn't found a pasture that I like at all. I like being right here with you, and 3 nights ago I'd addressed the West Point United States Military Academy. Excuse me, I get emotional. The United States Military Academy football squad. You're talking about the finest group of diverse young men from all over the world, from every racial and religious background, from every ethnic group, and there they are. And football's got a lot of bad stuff about it, but it's got a lot of good stuff too. Who remembers where you were on September 11th, 2001? Everybody. How many of you remember where you were on September 13th, 2001? Thursday afternoon after the Tuesday. We got 3 over here. Now we're people, some folks who remember, that's the largest group I've ever had. I mean, I've had 12,000 people and only 2 people remembered where they were on September 13th. I know where I was because I was working for ESPN. And after the horror of the Twin Towers, ESPN had wisely decided not to put any of us on airplanes. So I was driving from our home in North Carolina to Birmingham, Alabama, where Southern Mississippi was supposed to play the University of Alabama, if indeed the games were going to be played. The NCAA was holding meetings to decide whether or not to try to play the games. Do we really want to put 75,000 American citizens in harm's way all over America when we don't even know what we're dealing with yet? So I walk in, and because I had coached in that state, nice guy at the filling station recognized me. He said, "Coach, we're going to play those games?" I said, "Well, I don't know. You might be the first fan in America to find out if this cell phone of mine rings in the next 3 minutes, because I'll be here for a little while." And sure enough, my phone rang, and so I walked back up to the nice guy behind the counter, and I said, "We're not going to play." They called the games off. Very good decision. We were reeling as a nation, as you'll recall. And frankly, I was relieved that I didn't have to prepare to try to talk about something as foolish as an off-tackle play when we're wondering if we're going to be surviving. So I told him, "We're not going to play." I'll never forget his response. Jugular veins stood out, his face turned bright red. He leaned up in my face and he said, "Well, let me tell you something, Coach. In Attalla, Alabama, come Friday night, we're going to play football because it means a lot to us." Never seen such passion about high school football. I was so shattered and so spiritually distraught that as I got in my car, I decided I would make this a spiritual exercise. Let me just evaluate what I just heard and what's going on in this country and see if I can put the two together. Why does it matter in Attalla, Alabama, right after this disaster that is threatening our national identity, that they're going to go out there and put 11 kids on each side of the field and run around and tackle each other? Why does that matter? It began to dawn on me, little by little, that what matters, and it doesn't matter if it's Attalla, Alabama, or College Park, Georgia, or Valdosta, or Pueblo, Colorado, or Coronado, California, all those communities played football that Friday night. And it's because I think, at least in large part, in large measure, because of the huddle. You see, in the huddle is Black America. In the huddle is liberal America. In the huddle is conservative America, Muslim, Jewish person. Every kind of child is in that huddle. And guess who sits together in the stands the only time in the week that they are together? They certainly aren't together at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. And that's our fault. White folks, that's our fault. And don't get me off on that. But they're together in the stands, and somebody's child scores a touchdown. What do? They hug. These people who hate each other's guts, they're hugging at the football game. And they find out they don't hate each other. And in that huddle, it's what I call the miracle of team. You see, I can go to South Central LA or Southwest Atlanta, and I can recruit a young man who's a big, fast, bright guy who can come to our school and help us to have a good football team and get himself an education. And I can go to the hills of North Georgia and recruit another bright, big, fast guy who looks different, talks different, listens to different music, and comes from an entirely different culture, and they've both been trained to hate each other's guts. And I can stick them in a huddle, and I've actually had them come to me. I can make them dress next to each other in the locker room. Coach, don't put me next to that guy. That guy hates me. I don't care. It ain't going to last, or you're not going to last. You want to be on the team? Deal with it. Then I take them out on the field, and we sweat, and maybe we bleed a little bit every now and then. You can't even get your shirt off by yourself in football. You got to have your brother next to you to help pull it over your shoulder pads. So he's got to turn to this guy he thinks he hates and say, all right, help me get my shirt off. So and you know what happens? They figure out that the sweat smells the same on everybody. And when I get busted in my mouth, my blood's the same color as my brother. It doesn't matter what color our skin is. It matters that we're there and we're together and we got this thing to do. And I've actually had those same two guys, and I'm thinking of two specific individuals, come to me 2 years later and say, Coach, I thought I didn't like him, but I love him, and he's my brother now. And then the next miracle happens, and this is the most fun of all. One of them invites the other one home for Thanksgiving. And that mama that would have never dreamed of an African American walking in her house, it's hard to hate an 18-year-old that's bragging on your cooking. And then the next miracle happens when the other one invites the other one to his house way out in California or down the road in Southwest Atlanta. And we find out that not only do we love each other and need each other, but we're the same in God's eyes. It's the miracle of team. And the next thing you notice, and this is really fun, is it gets to where it's really hard to beat your team because those kids will not let each other down. They will not. It's what we can do in the church if we will. It happens in the church sometime. It happens in the homes sometime because of parents who are understanding and welcoming to diversity. It happens in the synagogue. It happens in the mosque, I presume, sometime. It always happens in the football huddle. Always. 100% of the time. When I reported to the Green Bay Packers, I was very distraught. I was the last draft choice. The legendary Vince Lombardi. Anybody ever heard of Vince Lombardi? Okay. Thought you had. Everybody. Oh, gosh, I hated him. You know, we are non-judgmental in the church, and I grew up in the church. White, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant males, we are the most judgmental people on the face of the earth. This guy that was my coach, I had Bobby Dodd as my coach. His name was Robert E. Lee Dodd. How's that for the current events? He was a Southern gentleman. And I go to this place, and Carolyn and I did not know if Green Bay, Wisconsin was in the contiguous 48 states. We didn't. We got a map out to figure that out. They had 20 rounds in the NFL draft, and I'll let you guess which round I was drafted. Lombardi turned to his personnel guy. He said, Pat Pepler, that was his name. That's why he called him that, but he said, Pepler, we've drafted 19 players. I'm exhausted. It's 2 a.m. I'm going to bed. Do something humorous with the 20th selection. So they did. I didn't want to go to Green Bay, Wisconsin, but it got worse. Vince Lombardi was a Yankee. He's from Brooklyn. He was a Catholic. He was an Italian. I didn't like any of those things. He had these priorities. He talked like this here. Your religion, your family, the Green Bay Packers, that's all you'll think of. In that order, those will be your priorities. And then as soon as we got on the practice field, he got very confused about the order of the priorities. I hated him. I had been trained to dislike all of those things that he was, as well as people of color, as well as foreigners, and not by my mom and dad, God bless them, but by the culture around here. And I'm so sorry. And I'll resent it the rest of my life that somebody told me I couldn't go down the street and play with this child because we had different pigmentation. And I can tell you horror stories about great athletes that I bumped into in New York who were all pro NBA players and found out we could have played together because they lived down the street and I never had seen them in my life. The horror, and that's just the selfish part of what happens with racism. But I take it personally because it marked all of us. Well, Lombardi, it turns out, was not my biggest problem. You've already figured that out. We had I played center. I know I do not look like a center, but I weighed about 1,000 pounds more than this. And we had a middle linebacker named Ray Nitschke, who was a future Hall of Famer. I was supposed to block Ray Nitschke in practice. That was hilarious. He broke my face mask, he broke my nose, and he knocked me out. That was the first day. I'm not making this up. But Ray Nitschke was not my biggest problem. My biggest problem is that Vince Lombardi. I'm asked all the time, why was Lombardi so great? Here's the answer. He would not tolerate racism. There was no prejudice. You said one prejudiced remark in that training camp, you were gone. So I figured, good gosh. And we had more African-American players than anybody in the league. Other teams would not have African-American players, and they bragged about it. And we crushed them every Sunday. And I used to think, are they going to figure this out? We had Herb Adderley and Willie Wood and Lionel Aldridge and Elijah Pitts and Marv Fleming, gosh, and the most intimidating of all was the great Willie Davis, the defensive captain. Willie Davis was working on his master's degree in business, came from Grambling State University, working on his master's degree in business at the University of Chicago while being captain of the greatest football team of all time. He's in the NFL Hall of Fame now, but he's in my Hall of Fame for a very different reason. I figured those guys, and I'm serious, I figured those guys would hear my Southern accent, hurt me, and send me home. And I didn't blame them. We were right in the middle of civil rights. It was 1965. We were burning cities and marching. And I had no clue what I was dealing with. But my biggest problem is that I had never been in a huddle with an African-American person. Now, that was not my fault. That was somebody else's problem. But it was inherited by my generation. So I was so intimidated and insecure. And I was ripe to be injured and sent home. And in that state of mind, I walked out of the dorm one night. Oh, yeah, we were in Wisconsin. It's August, and it's 47 degrees. That ain't right. God, everything was alien. So I'm walking out into the darkness at St. Norbert College, where our training camp was. And this voice came out of the darkness from behind me. Bill. I thought it was God. I just collapsed in the grass. It was the great Willie Davis. I said, oh no, he's going to tell me to get lost. And I don't blame him. Who could blame him? He said, Bill, I've been watching you at practice, and I like your effort. You try so hard. You got a chance to make our team, and I'm going to help you. I said, you're going to help me? He said, yeah. When Coach Lombardi is screaming profanity in your face and spitting in your eye and Nitschke's tearing your head off, and they did, all of those things, you come find me and I'll get you through it. I'll get you through it. That is leadership. That is leadership. We call him Dr. Feelgood. And sure enough, Nitschke would be tearing my head off, and I'd run find number 87, Willie D. I say, how you feel, old man? He says, feel good, man, feel good. Feel good, you can do it. You can do it, Bill, you can do it. So what did the great man do for the terrified white kid from College Park, Georgia? He didn't just help me play in the NFL for 10 years. He didn't get me a bunch of Super Bowl rings. That wasn't his motive. He changed my life. I was transformed with an unexpected, undeserved, unrewarded act of kindness by a great Christian gentleman. That is leadership. That is where we are today. Each of us has somebody in our lives that needs us every bit as much as the terrified Bill Curry needed his man Willie Davis. 3 summers ago, I had the privilege of attending Willie's 80th birthday party and embracing him in front of his 300 of his best friends in Las Vegas and telling them that story and telling them that I owe my career to this great man who loved me when I deserved it least. And it took me 25, 30 years. I finally got it out of him. He wouldn't admit it. He didn't want to seem sanctimonious. But I kept bugging him, and we were at a leadership institute in Colorado. I finally sitting there late at night. I said, come on, Willie, why did you do that? I had flown to L.A. when I first became head coach at Georgia Tech. That was one of the times that I was very impressed with Bill Curry, but those are long gone. And I took him to lunch so that he could brag on me, what the great potential he had seen back when I was a rookie in the NFL. So I said, Willie, what was it you saw that made you want to be associated and help me to make the team? You know what he said? I don't know. Hurt my feelings. That's not what he's supposed to say. But it dawned on me later, he did it for everybody. He was captain of the team. He helped everybody. He was doing his job. And that's why nobody could beat us. Lombardi's playoff record was 9-1, by the way, and the one game they lost was the first time they got in the World Championship. They didn't lose any more. There will never be a team to win 5 World Championships in 7 years, ever again. That bunch of guys was unbelievable, the way and that didn't mean we were nice to each other all the time. There were plenty of knockdown drag-outs. That didn't mean I could start to block Ray Nitschke, because, in fact, I never did get good at blocking Ray Nitschke. But here's what I did do, thanks to Willie and others, and Coach Lombardi. I became the best player that Bill Curry could be. And that's all we can do. And if you and I will tell the truth, we'll be God's best player that we can be. We don't have to be Bill Britt. We don't have to be Ron Greer. We don't have to be some of the incredible influences, but we can be that which God gave us with our magnanimitas, and it will make a difference in somebody's life. And we may or may not know about it. We may or may not get the reward of being embraced by that person. But when we go in the huddle and we can look each other in the eye and know that we're going to give it all for each other, then that's what the church is supposed to be. And that's what we can be. And that's what I just heard here today in the few minutes that I had the privilege of hearing the previous speaker. I wish I had heard all of it. As for Lombardi, I went on to another team, actually several other teams, and I had deep resentment for him. I never did approve of his methods, and I said so. And I said so in such harsh terms that it was crude, frankly dishonest. When he was on his deathbed with colon cancer in 1970, one of my teammates called and said, you and I are going to go see Coach Lombardi. I was in Washington working with the Players Association. Bob Long called me and said, you and I are going to go. Bob was Catholic, and he knew about lighting the candles. He said, we're going to light a candle for Coach, and we're going to go see him at Georgetown Hospital. And I said, no, we are not going to see him. You can go see him, but he wouldn't allow me in the room. He would throw me out of the room. And Bob said, and I'll never forget these words, I can't use all the words he used, but it was something to this effect: if I have to drag your large rear end out of that hotel room into my car, you are going to see Coach, and I'll be there in 15 minutes. So I walked trembling into that great man's room. The person I really feared seeing the most was Marie, his beautiful wife, who had always treated Carolyn and me like we were her own. They did not deserve what I had done publicly and the remarks I had made. So I stammered and stumbled and got something out like, Coach, I'm ashamed of myself that I said some things I shouldn't have said, and I'm so sorry. And I came here today to tell you that you've meant a lot to my life. He took my hand with his left hand. His right hand was full of IVs. And his body was emaciated, but those eyes never changed. Those steely eyes fixed me. And as I said, Coach, you've meant a lot to my life. He said, you can mean a lot to mine if you'll pray for me. So what had he done? What had the great man done? He had forgiven me when I least deserved it. So that his priorities, which we used to ridicule, religion, family, all that, oh, yeah, sure, they were real. It was the truth. And you and I have a capacity. We may not be Vince Lombardi, but we can be who God made us to be. And every single one of us is going to have to do that if we're going to reverse what we're seeing in our nation, because it starts right at the top. And let's not kid ourselves. The example that our children are receiving right now, we need to reinforce proper example by being that which we claim to be in every opportunity. Our magnanimitas must outweigh the nonsense and the horror and the dishonesty. Because right now, this chilling little poetic metaphor by James Patrick Kenny has never been more appropriate. Sad to say. 6 men were trapped by circumstance in bleak and bitter cold. Each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the story is told. The dying fire in need of wood, the first man held his back, for of the faces round the fire, he noticed one was black. The second man saw not one of his own local church and could not bring himself to give the fire his stick of birch. The poor man sat in tattered clothes and gave his coat a hitch. Why should he give up his stick of wood to warm the idle rich? The rich man sat and thought of all the wealth he had in store and how to keep what he had earned from the lazy, shiftless poor. The black man's face spoke revenge, and the fire passed from his sight. He saw in his stick of wood a chance to spite the white. The last man of this forlorn group did naught except for gain. Only those that gave to him was how he played the game. Their logs gripped tight, in death's still grasp was proof of human sin. They died, not from the cold without. They died from the cold within. They died, not from the cold without. They died from the cold within. Now, a rhetorical question for you. What would have happened had there been one real leader seated at the fire? What would have happened if Nelson and Mandela had been seated at the fire? What if Willie Davis or Vince Lombardi had been seated? What if Mother Teresa had been seated at the fire? Everybody would have lived. Everybody would have prospered. Somebody's got to throw their log on the dying fire when there's a risk involved. And we're going to have to do it over and over and over. And that's not just metaphorical. So where do we get the strength for that? How on earth can we possibly do that which is so difficult and seems so unpleasant? And of course, we all know the answer to that right now, sitting here. But I want to close this way by reminding you of the encouragement that matters most and that is the most inspirational in each of our lives. When he saw the multitude, he went up to a high place, and his disciples joined him. When he had sat down, his disciples joined him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek. They shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those that hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those that are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely, for my name's sake, rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For thus were the prophets persecuted who came before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its flavor, what good is it? It's good only to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You're the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do we light a candle and place it under a bowl, but rather on a lampstand, so that it can provide light for all who are in the room. For all who are in the room. Let your light shine, so that men can see your good works and rejoice and praise your Father who is in heaven. Who was the coach of the year when those words were spoken? Who was the most powerful human being on earth? Who was the most beautiful, influential female at the royal courts? Who sat on the throne in Rome? Who won the chariot races? We don't know. We don't care. So what really matters, what really abides? The words of the Master, whispered down eternity, just for you and me. Let your light shine. Now, to close today, I'd like you to take that magnanimitas, that greatness of spirit, and join it, because and join it with the person next to you. It's a scientific fact. In fact, reach across the aisle where possible. Could somebody take a picture of that and send it to Washington right there? When we join hands and when we ignore our differences and move beyond our differences, when we unite in God's good time and in God's grace, our capacity to do good and to do well does not increase arithmetically. It does not increase geometrically. It increases exponentially. Holy Spirit, exponential Holy Spirit, and it happens in an instant, so that the potential in this room is here today to change the world. God bless you. Thank you.